Mistborn, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. I just finished this bad boy. It was written back in 2006, and there's only about approximately another 1 billion YouTube reviews on this book out there, so I'm definitely tapping into some pretty fertile and original content here. Before I get into it, let me try to summarize this book for you in just one sentence. Imagine Django Unchained meets North Korea, but with magic. That's pretty much what we've got. Okay, that's the book review done. Done, bye. Done, bye. All right, so this is going to be a very spoiler-filled summary. So if you haven't read the book and you have like a genuine interest in reading it, I would suggest clicking off now. Because I'm just going to fully go through the storyline and do kind of a review thing as I'm going. So to start us off, the setting for this book feels almost kind of grimdark. The weather's all fucked up. There's constantly ash falling from the sky. There's like this nobility ruling class and like a lower slave class called the Scar. And did I say that there's always ash falling from the sky? What's the other thing that's fucked up? Oh, the mist. Yeah, it's in the fucking, literally, it's in the title. Mistborn, book 1, yeah. There's fucking mist everywhere. It only comes out at night, and everyone's super kind of superstitious of it and doesn't really understand like what it does or, you know, if it's dangerous or if it's not dangerous, but it gets into that. So in the prologue, we're introduced to Kelsier, who's the main character of the story, and he's kind of your classic Aragorn, Jesus, kind of like super cool guy that nothing bad will ever happen to, and that expectation will definitely never be subverted later on throughout the book. So his backstory is that he was originally imprisoned in this blood diamond mine called the Pits of Hathsin. It's where they send, you know, all of their convicts of society to go and like work until they die, essentially. So in the prologue of the book, Kelsier rocks up to a slave plantation, and we get a sense for how downtrodden the Scar are, with dialogue alluding to how the noblemen are allowed to perform unwanted sex upon the slaves, but if they do, they have to kill them afterwards. This is because there can't be any mixing of noble and Scar bloodlines. So Kelsier goes and Robin Hoods some food and brings it back to the Scar in their living quarters at night, when it turns out that one of the young Scar girls has been taken up to the big house for a sex appointment with the nobleman that owns the plantation, which obviously leads to her being executed, or will lead to her being executed. It's at this point that we get introduced to what's easily the strongest part of the book, the magic system. The main magic system is called Allomancy. It's a very hard magic system with defined rules and limitations. The way it works is you ingest a certain type of metal and then you burn it, which means you use it as a fuel source to do the magic that's associated with that particular type of metal. To start us out, we'll cover the 8 basic metals and what they do. Firstly, we have iron. Iron pretty much allows you to pull on any metallic object. It's pretty much like having the power of Magneto if all you could do is pull stuff towards you. Second up, we have steel, which is pretty much the polar opposite of iron. So it's, again, like having the power of Magneto if all you could do is push stuff away from you. The third metal is pewter, so it's pretty much just trenbolone. It's on the USADA ban list. You'll hit a new PR. You know, everyone will call you fake natty. It gives you super strength, basically. The fourth metal is tin, and it just enhances all of your senses, so it's just like chewing 5 gum, essentially. Brass pretty much just turns you into a walking human Xanax dispenser. It gives you the ability to just soothe everyone's emotions around you.
Daddy, chill.
The next metal is zinc, which just has the power to do the opposite of what brass does. It rights people's emotions, which can range anywhere between slightly agitating people to literally inciting a riot. The seventh metal is copper, which is kind of one of the more lame ones. It just gives you the ability to mask everyone around you that's using allomancy, so it just puts you all in incognito mode. The eighth metal is bronze, which is the opposite of copper, and it just gives you the ability to detect when other people around you are using allomancy. So you're either one of 2 types of allomancer. You can either use only one of the metals, which makes you a misting, or more rare than that, you're a mistborn, which means you can use any of the metals. So anyway, Kelsier goes, burns down the plantation, saves the girl. That's the end of the prologue, and then we move on to the first chapter. In the first chapter, we meet Vin. She's a young teenage street urchin, and her life sucks. She lives in a thieving crew and gets by just being a quiet, reserved, cautious fly on the wall. Her thieving crew boss, kind of like a Fagin type of guy, brings her along to important shit thinking she's a lucky charm because shit just seems to go really well when she's around. Vin herself believes this as well and doesn't really question why she can kind of influence people to do the stuff she wants. What's actually going on is that she's using allomancy, but doing so subconsciously, not actually realizing that she's using it or that she even is an allomancer. One of these times, she's just hanging around being a lucky charm. She gets sussed out that she's using allomancy by an obligator, which are pretty much just the feds of the story. The obligators then get the Steel Inquisitors involved, which are these hideous creatures with spikes for eyes, and use one of them to try and track down Vin. Kelsier clues on that all this is happening and decides to intervene and save Vin. From here, Kelsier figures out that Vin is actually a Mistborn like him, one of the ones that has the ability to use all of the metals, and explains this to her in what feels like kind of a very "you're a wizard, Harry" moment.
A what?
Kelsier, with the aid of his crew, then begins to teach her defense against the dark arts in its various forms. So it's at this point in the story that we're introduced to what's essentially the rest of the Ocean's 11 crew. As Vin goes and spends time with each of the individual members with the crew, each of them has the power to use just one of the metals they're misting. And it kind of like, this part of the story often gets described as like a video game where you're going around leveling up with different characters. And it kind of does feel a little bit like that, but I have no problem with it. It felt fun to read. You know, she's getting different perspectives and life lessons from each of them, as well as learning how to use the metal that person knows how to use. And throughout this process, she's slowly becoming sort of more and more like an instrumental part of the plan that they're trying to pull off. So it's at this point that we learn that what the job is that they're planning is a military coup, or kind of the heist hybrid version of a military coup. To do this, Kelsier needs to get his hands on some atium, which is the 11th metal, and it's hectic and has hectic abilities. This obviously begs the question, what are the 9th and 10th metal? Because if you recall from earlier, we only went through the first 8. So in this book, we don't actually find out what the 10th metal is, but the 9th metal is gold. Gold is actually pretty lame sauce. It shows different versions of people in like a shadowy form that hovers near them. And it shows a version of them if what they had have done in the past had have been different, or if they had have made different decisions. It's pretty much just magical regretty spaghetti. The POV switches back to Kelsier as he goes out and does a really cool mission where he kills a bunch of people, breaking into one of the noble houses, getting some ATM, and just being hella cool. When Sanderson does this kind of thing and writes action sequences and stuff like that that involve the magic system, this stuff's actually very entertaining. But the next section of the book is when we get to Vin trying to infiltrate high society as part of the big heist that they're trying to pull off. And we get like multiple chapters of her POV where she's attending balls. Holy fuck, it sucks balls. All of these chapters where she's going and meeting the nobles and trying to pretend to be one and having this identity crisis or whatever. Just, I mean, this is the part of the book where I can really tell, I feel like where people start to give the book a bit of a YA label. It's just so painful. For me personally, these chapters just absolutely screech the brakes on any of the momentum that the story has. At one of these balls, Vin meets a bad boy that's this hot guy that sits in the corner like an emo and reads books and doesn't play by the nobility's social norms, and obviously he becomes the romantic interest for the rest of the book. I've seen a lot of people say that they don't enjoy when Brandon Sanderson tries to write romance, and reading these chapters I can see what they're saying. The start of the book's super violent and has like really gory descriptions of deaths, and the tone is set there, and then it's all juxtaposed with this really like reads like YA Twilighty kind of romance, and it just tonally it just throws you out of it so much. I just couldn't get into it. So when the book finally gets the fuck back on track, Vin and Kelsier go and break into the Lord Ruler's palace. They do this because he frequently goes into one of the rooms in particular to check on his Discord mods or something nefarious like that, and it's all very mysterious, and Kelsier wants to know what's in there. This raid on the Lord Ruler's palace goes terribly. Vin ends up getting stabbed and mortally wounded, but in the process she also pinches the Lord Ruler's journal. So after barely escaping with her life, there's a period of her healing up and getting back on her feet, And naturally, once she is back on her feet and feels all good again, her first priority is to go back to one of these fucking balls. During one of these balls, she meets a noble woman called Shan. It turns out Shan is just a massive bitch, but she's also the ex-fiance of her new love interest, badass bookworm boy. Did I mention that his name is... What the fuck is his name? Why am I blanking on that? Elend. It turns out during one of her conversations with this ex-fiance of her new love interest that the ex-fiance is using the power of Xanax on her and trying to manipulate her into doing shit in their social circle. So she's a misting, presumably. Another character that's worth mentioning at this point is Sazed. Sazed is a Terrorsman, which is a race of people in this universe, and he's kind of Vin's Alfred throughout the story. Sazed tells Vin that there is actually another form of magic separate to allomancy altogether called feruchemy. Feruchemy allows Terrace people to treat pieces of metal kind of like batteries and store their juice in them for use at a later time. Sazed can also use feruchemy to store memories in perfect detail. So this is pretty much just used as a device for him to squat down and dump a whole bunch of exposition on us at various points throughout the story. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, Kelsier has been building up an army of Scar to help with the plan to overthrow the Lord Ruler. While they're waiting, this army ends up getting itchy sword fingers and go to try and fuck shit up by themselves. They fail spectacularly and actually get their own shit severely fucked up. So basically they had an army for the big plan and now they don't. After this, the cat is officially out of the bag and the Lord Ruler knows about this plan because of the army that tried to go rogue on them. So he goes out and pretty much declares that this rebellion is officially not chill and does a bunch of public executions. Concurrent to all of this, Kelsier's scheming in the background makes all of the noble families start to fight. And it turns out Vin's new really awesome book reading boyfriend is going to be assassinated as a result of all this infighting. Vin decides to save Elend, and it turns out the assassin who's trying to kill him is Shan, his ex-fiance. And it turns out she doesn't just have the power of perp drank, but is actually a full Mistborn like Vin. So again, this is actually a pretty entertaining fight to read where Vin and Shan are just going at it. There's kind of like an emotional undercurrent too because she's the ex-fiance of the dude that she's into now and she was trying to kill him, but it's just, that side of it just feels like such a stretch, but the actual reading of the action scene itself and the fight is really entertaining. The only real problem that stuck out to me at this point is that Vin's just learned all her new Mistborn abilities, whereas someone like Shan, who has been raised as a Mistborn, probably would have been getting training since she was young. So the fact that Vin, kind of trounces her pretty much in the fight, like it feels, I don't know, not Mary Sue, but kind of like she's just written to be a little bit OP. So we're switched back to Kelsier. He's pretty mad about the Lord Ruler doing public executions and decides to hit him and the nobility where it hurts, their money. So to explain how he's going to do this, let's cast our minds back to the beginning of the video when I was describing how he was imprisoned in a blood diamond mine. Well, it's not actually a blood diamond mine, literally. It's a mine for atium, the 11th metal. It has to be mined by hand, so they can't use any form of allomancy to sort of pull it out of the ground because it fucks it up and breaks it for some reason. So dudes have to crawl down into the cracks and pull it out by hand. Now, because atium is so rare, even though it has a very powerful allomantic property, so it basically allows you to see a short period into the future, because of its nature of being like super rare, it functions as kind of the gold standard for the society. So it's what everything in the economy of the nobles revolves around. So his plan is to pretty much just go there, fucking destroy the entire mine, like reset them all to zero, like just Tyler Durden the whole thing. So after this, Kelsier is still mad, and also the Lord Ruler is still mad. So the Lord Ruler carts up a bunch of Scar and starts parading them through the street, presumably with the intention of executing them. Kelsier is all like, nah, and just gets stuck into it there and then on the spot with a Steel Inquisitor. Kelsier is extremely cool at this point and extremely coolly kills the Steel Inquisitor cool style and cements himself as a cool character that will definitely be around for a lot longer and be fun to watch, and he's cool well, and he's awesome and he's cool. So anyway, the Lord Ruler rocks up and kills him with one hit. No meme, just kills him with one hit. So after seeing pretty much irrefutable evidence that the Lord Ruler has max stats in like everything and is for all intents and purposes unkillable, they decide to do what any other sane group of people would do, push on with the plan.
Suicide is badass.
No.
Vin decides to try and break into the Lord Ruler's secret sex dungeon one more time in hope of kink shaming him to death, and gets knocked out and captured. Vin then wakes up in a cell with Sazed. He uses Feruchemy to Hulk smash them out of the cell. They then have a final fight with the Lord Ruler, and it turns out he can use Feruchemy as well as Allomancy. So it's revealed to us that this is the way that he was able to give the illusion of being immortal. So he goes into his gamer dungeon command center every day, and what he's doing in there is storing up a bunch of juice in his ATM armband, jewelry, bracelet, things that he always wears. And that is how he's able to give like the illusion of staying young perpetually. Vin figures this out, and in a really weird moment that's not really explained at all, she's able to use the power of the mists, which just kind of creep in, and she's able to draw upon them. And this is like an entirely new power. You haven't missed anything. This isn't explained at any other point in the book. She's somehow able to pull power from the mists and then use that power to basically remove the fucking Duracell ATM armbands off the Lord Ruler's arms and then just yeet them out the door. And he pretty much picture of Dorian Gray's to death. Like he just ages super fast and he's fucked. So after the dust settles, this leaves a power vacuum, and hot book boy Elend takes the place of the Lord Ruler and the king of the empire, and everyone just accepts him as the king, which is pretty much the end of the book. And it's probably one of the things that I had the biggest problem with when I was reading it. I mean, like all the other stuff to do with magic and there being inconsistencies with, you know, how powerful Vin is as compared to other people that should have had more training than her, and her just being super OP. All that I can forgive and whatever, like it's fantasy, who cares? But with the sort of like social structure of like the whole thing is being built up that the Scar, the slave class, are going to overthrow and take over society and take it back from the nobles. And that's kind of what you're rooting for to happen the whole time. And then when this super privileged, just, I don't know, this noble boy that has no real military experience, no experience leading other people, very little political experience other than just like the goings on and connivings of high society. He's just, they're like, oh yeah, he's the good choice for the king. It's just like, it all feels like so believable right up until that point. I mean, believable for a fantasy story, but believable that it works within the rules of its own universe up until that point where, you know, definitely not the stand-in for Brandon Sanderson himself as like the cool guy that, I don't know, reads books, but is also cool and like has the power of reading on his side, and he's just like this bookish bookworm nerd dude. He's the one that they choose to be the king of the whole society. I mean, I get that authors are going to like insert themselves into their works a lot, I don't know, to varying degrees when they're writing characters, but it's just so on the nose that this Elend character is just a stand-in for a cool version of Brandon Sanderson. I don't know. I just couldn't quite get there, but I don't know. Yeah, they're pretty much my thoughts on The Final Empire. Goodbye.